So I want to, first of all, wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. Um, Hopefully we all have someone we love somewhere, right? Um, and I want to thank our sponsors, which is Archive Magazine, Pro Photo Daily, American Photography, Epson, and Photo Shelter. So thank you. We thank them for helping us always. I ask anyone who hasn't to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which Jay will put the link right into the chat room for everyone. And tonight we have a wonderful fine artist, Frances Jakubek, who is going to give us a little background on her journey through this world of photography. And she's going to share her screen right now, and off we go. Frances, the world is yours.
Thank you so much, Frank. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. Thank you, Jay, for the help with the setup. I see some people I recognize in this group tonight that I really love, and I'm so grateful
No, great.
to have you here. And Frank, thank you for your support and encouragement to share my own work. It is something I rarely do, so it's a pleasure. I'm jittery and excited to sort of get into the depths of what I've been working on for uh, my career of making photographs. So this is just a presentation screen. So I'll start this evening with an image of mine that I continuously learn from, and a passage from the book, Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. A body who has lived a long time accumulates debris. It cannot be avoided. But if a woman will return to the instinctual nature instead of sinking into bitterness, she will be revivified, reborn. The woman who returns to the instinctual and creative nature will come back to life. She will want to play. She will want to grow both wide and deep. But first, there has to be a cleansing. I would like to introduce you to the concept of descansos. If you've ever traveled in Old Mexico, New Mexico, Southern Colorado, Arizona, or parts of the South, you have seen little white crosses by the roadway. These are descansos, resting places. They are symbols that mark a death. Right there, right on that spot, someone's journey in life halted unexpectedly. Women have died 1,000 deaths before they are 20 years old. They've gone in this direction or that and have been cut off. They have hopes and dreams that have been cut off also. While all these things deepen individuation, differentiation, growing up and growing out, blossoming, becoming awake and aware and conscious, there are also profound tragedies and have to be grieved as such. To make descansos means taking a look at your life and marking where the small deaths and the big deaths have taken place. I like to make a timeline of a woman's life on a big long sheet of white butcher paper and to mark a cross on the places along the graph, starting with her infancy all the way to the present, where parts and pieces of her life have died. We mark where the roads not taken, paths that were cut off, ambushes, betrayals, and deaths. I put a little cross along the timeline at the places that should have been mourned or still need to be mourned. Be gentle with yourself and make the descansos, the resting place for aspects of yourself that were on their way to somewhere, but never arrived. Descansos mark the death sites, the dark times, but they are also love notes to your suffering. They are transformative. There is a lot to be said for pinning things to the earth so they don't follow us around. There is a lot to be said for laying them to rest. So my personal practice has always felt just that, incredibly personal. I've worked in the photography industry, in nonprofit and gallery sectors, on the side of supporting and creating exhibition opportunities for other artists. It's been a great honor to host and champion photographers all around me, and it's rare for me to talk about my own work. The pictures I've made for myself feel very intimate, and the act of photographing is my way of processing emotions and expressing grief. This is one of the first formal self-portraits I made in the earliest semester of college. Thinking about Descanso's The Love Notes to Our Suffering, I look at this image now, almost 2 decades later, and feel a love for this person that feels so familiar but so distant. This image was made in the house that I grew up in Connecticut, the last visit home for Christmas I would ever have in that house. To the left of the frame is an old Olin Mills portrait made of me when I was about 3. And in the background right, scattered light graces a school picture of my older brother. I see my mother in all of the accents of this image and my father in the baseboards. My college program at the New England Institute of Art in Boston, it was very studio focused. And with that, the exploration of the body, my own body, became a great interest. I can mark the events of what was happening at the time these images were made, and I struggle with either oversharing or keeping secret the impetus to make the picture. This image is from so long ago when I was really struggling with body image, and my brother was in a bad accident limiting the use of his legs. So the body became this amplified space of exploration and pain. And this image, though it's filled with sort of stress for me, is the image I still use on my business card. So that's this little crop here. I call this series of self-portraits the archive of the ego. Each time I show them, I revisit the full body of work and connect very differently each time with individual photographs. Some of them I would have never shared at the time of making them, like this image from 2008, but I look at them now with empathy and compassion. Though I look at this person as a younger and earlier version of myself, I still feel very protective of the images that may depict me in a vulnerable way or show my body too clearly. I imagine working on this project until I'm gone and look forward to the years I can share and look back at the images that I won't show you now. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to sprinkle in a few photographers that have been a major influence on me and my practice. This is a self-portrait by Rosalind Fox Solomon, who I worked closely with at Bruce Silverstein Gallery in New York. And though I didn't know about her work before I was employed there, I look back now and find many connections in the way that she photographed herself. And she's coming out with a self-portrait book at 94 years old in a few weeks.
So Francis, working at Silverstein, and discovering other photographers that you didn't know, how does that influence you moving forward?
Major. I think before I worked with Bruce, I worked at a small nonprofit in Massachusetts called the Griffin Museum, where
Mm.
we had a lot of emerging photographers, almost 60 shows a year. And then working with Bruce was the first time that I really experienced handling like the fine prints of things. So we represented the estate of Andre Cortez, for example, and Frederick Summer, and handling some of those prints really just put the object of the photograph into such a new space. So you'll see a few more references below.
And all right, so you're in that space and you're emotionally obviously connected. And how did the commercial piece of that affect you? Like, we have to sell prints, so it's a business. How did you marry that, in your head inspirationally?
Well, I've always kept like my own art making pretty private. And it's funny at this in sales aspect, I was always really good about getting excited and, talking about the artist and their process and their intent. But then when it came to talking about numbers, I really shied away. And I'm not a good closer in that way. I am a great hype woman. But when it comes to talking about cash, it's not for me. So I was the registrar with Bruce. So for years, I got to just handle the prints. And then I was sort of accidentally promoted to director. And it was the sales that kind of pushed me out of that space, actually. But I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Uh, so going on, these are still pretty early. This is an image from the first apartment I shared with a boyfriend. And though we lived in the same house, I declared that we have separate rooms. This theme of distance and intimacy will continue to appear in my relationships as well as my work. This is an image with my cat who I had for 20 years, who passed away this August. I've been drawn to the way that memories form from viewing a photograph more so than the experience itself. I remember this house so well, the way the light moved in the endless rooms. But would I remember these images if I didn't have these images?
Crazy.
There are so many references to artists I feel inspired by throughout all my pictures. This work of Anna Gaskell has always remained in my mind. Here's a portrait with a cutout from a book of a Man Ray print framed on my wall. The references and path paved by Francesca Woodman is an undeniable source for my work as well. These are two of hers. And sometimes it's hard to escape the aesthetics we've all come to love, but it's images like these featuring my grandmother. For me, it's the memory of her telling me not to smile in photographs. And this direct conversation I didn't have with her continues through this image. Working in the field of photography, I was often asked to pose for photographs, and I never wanted to. This protection I felt pushed me to make my own record of how I appeared on this on my own terms. In 2014, my dad also moved far away from where I was living and sold the house, which was my grandparents', and which I was under the impression I would inherit.
Yeah.
Mm.
Does she fit in?
I remember having breakfast with a friend and lamenting about the loss of the place I thought I'd be calling home and how I didn't make any recent photographs. They urged me to drive back to Connecticut to do so and made me leave the table, to which I am very grateful for.
So if you want to share that, how did that work, with, no, this will be my house and I'll live here for another 30 years and I'll pass it along.
Always.
I'm sure you had all these kinds of thoughts, but, something, I guess, practical comes up and we have to do what we have to do. How did that affect you and your artwork, but also you and your dad?
It was tough. It was, we were talking earlier, I am like a Northeastern baby. And my mother moved down to the South, so did my brother, and then my dad. And it felt like a real disconnect. Like the three of them were all together and again in a place that we weren't from. So it was really sort of tough for me.
Yeah.
I would say it was sort of a loss there. But since COVID, my communication with my dad has been wonderful. So I've let go of some of this bitterness, honestly, about losing this house. And it's in Stamford. I don't want to pay those taxes anyway.
Okay, there you go. You found a way to find peace, right?
Exactly. So that night I rushed back to the house. He was out saying farewell to a friend, and I was making pictures with what I could find left in the house. Some of them were scraps from my grandfather's crafts and molding from the house, all sorts of just wood junk. I went into every room, including the attic, sort of just desperately seeking a way to connect with this space. I was looking at it as this vessel of my family's history that would soon be separate from us.
And Francis, is part of this, you're documenting it, right? You know, because now this is the last time you'll be in there, but
Mhm.
you're also taking it in your style, in your emotional connection to everything. So how did you separate that, and how did you bring that together? Because if we didn't know that story, we wouldn't,
Mm.
we wouldn't be able to tell, right? Because these look like the rest of your work.
Right. And it was funny to, as I was doing this, where I was like, oh, I have to sort of mix these in because they
Mhm.
do, in a way, still feel like pictures of me,
Right.
where it's like this lineage, it's this family history that even if they're of objects, I love that you asked that, Frank, because I do feel connected to these objects. And here is this portrait again of my grandmother, which I can't remember if it was in the house or I had it in the car for some reason.
Mhm.
Um,
And how long ago are these images?
This was from 2014, I think
Okay.
November. And the last night in this house, I carved our last name into this shelf just to have some sort of like concrete thing because those shelves aren't going anywhere. I hope. I don't even want to know if they're gone. I also, when I was here, I didn't have a tripod with me. So looking back at these, they feel like a collaboration with the house. I placed the camera on windowsills, on this built-in furniture. This was a table in the closet, and from the floor, like this picture.
And
So my
Francis,
dad and I,
no, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Continue.
Um, so this was my dad and I we shared a couple tears on the fireplace. And I don't even remember where I stayed this night, but it felt like a completion, a closing of some chapter or a small death.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you is, in some of the images, you're free. You've taken off your clothes, right? And you're embracing the space. What makes you do that? S- Like, what is the emotional thinking around that to get yourself closer, that you become one with your environment?
Maybe it is exactly that. It's like a closeness. I think with clothes too, there's like a timestamp you could put on an article of clothing sometimes that without that signifier of a date, a trend, or something, they become timeless is sort of a cheesy word, but without time, sort of like suspended, I guess. Um,
So the only thing that would really change that then, in the context of having no clothes on, is really your hair length.
mm,
In that, all right, and now I have short hair, and that was that'll become sort of a marker of time, right? In some way.
mm, totally
Okay.
dying of hair. So this was back in my own space, and I took my grandfather's tools,
Mm.
um, as my dad was clearing out the house. And I set up this little studio in my bedroom. There's just a single light. And I started photographing my grandparents' things like intertwined. So it was Walter's tools and Mary's jewels. I found myself posing with these instruments, trying to find a conversation between body and structure, longevity and mortality. And some I didn't really know how to use. I didn't fully know their purpose or how my grandfather used them. So then it sort of came this like how I utilized my body language to make an interesting photograph. Um, and the contrast in contrast to how this object or tool would actually be used. And they became metaphors for family, for support, for lack of support, objects of desire or danger. Walter and Mary were reunited in this strange dance of me trying to find a family storyline that maybe didn't actually exist.
So when you're doing this and coming up with this idea, it's got to be, I mean, like a shot of adrenaline. like I have all these tools that are really boring and this, and that, and now they're art pieces. I mean, that must be so exhilarating, to find another use for them with yourself as part of it. That's so beautiful.
Thank you, Brian. And I was excited to make these because it
Ed.
was not a complicated light setup. I worked so much so I could make them at night, which was really a relaxing thing for me. I remember this picture very distinctly with this screw in my finger, and I felt the little pinch, and I was like, that's the shot. And I could feel it every time I look at this. I
That's
also install like almost every day of my life. So some of these things, like the screws were mine, and it was sort of just building into this storyline. I loved making these in this simple,
You can
simple
tell.
process.
You can tell. I have to share one quick story. My daughter is pregnant, and I'm helping them get the baby's rooms ready. So I brought my tools over to their house, and I had in my toolbox this old center punch that was my dad's. So when I left everything there. I said, "Listen, you guys can lose everything. Do not lose this center punch. It's my dad's." And so
Yeah.
I'm feeling that right through these are really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And that's what it is. It's like sometimes these private experiences that feel so personal, they're actually the most universal, right? When we feel this like deep, dark, like, oh, this is so much about me, it almost is easier to reach other people. So I'm thrilled to hear it.
Yeah.
Just a few more of these little detour into last night. So the rest of this archive I'll share is chronological. So this is also 2014. And again, with my own portrait of me as a child. This is like little girl I aim to protect. I knew you guys would use this for the promotion because it was Valentine's Day, perfect romantic moment, the worst wedding date of my life. That night, my dress was bright blue and I felt amazing. And he was long past drunk. And I really kind of love this moment I had with myself, again, with the camera propped on something random in the room. E.J. Belloc's Storyville portraits are always in the back of my mind. So 2017 was a really tough year. That relationship for me ended in kind of a nasty way, and my brother passed away
From that accident?
from, yes, ultimately
Yeah.
XYZ. Yeah. And, my only brother, so the loss, it will play a huge role in how I navigate relationships and my own health moving forward. So the first year without him, I looked for love I was missing from him in many other places, wanting to replace the feeling of emptiness with something.
And Frances, when you started, back in school with your first photo project, was it always easy for you to be so intimate with the photographs themselves and telling the stories? Or did that just develop as you moved on?
I think that has developed since I've moved on. I recently had a review and I didn't want to say anything about like what they were actually about. And it feels better if you do, and I think some of these images, like they seem like sort of over sexualized, but then you learn about it's like actually processing grief and like awareness of your own body, that it makes it a different picture.
Totally. Yes.
I think
It gives
in
us
museums,
context.
I always have like a hate-love relationship with, I prefer if it's the artist's voice rather than the curator's voice, because sometimes you can just get influenced by the text too much so. So
Mm.
I like always giving people an option, unless you're a captive in a Zoom room, then I'll tell you. I traveled a ton this year. This is from the weirdest Airbnb in Barcelona. I found it much easier to make images in places I've never been before. My own world felt kind of stifling.
But that's a new experience for you, right? Because
Yeah.
everything else was in your environment that you controlled, and you knew the nooks and crannies. So how does that emerge for you? Just is it a coming out sort of a thing?
Maybe are coming out almost the opposite of, in my own space, I felt like maybe it's like an element of control. Like I
Mm.
felt like I had more control, and now it's like you let the wind take you because it's gonna anyway. And I just felt sort of, I don't know, like encumbered by my space at this time. And I was trying to not spend time at home.
Okay.
So I went on a little road trip with myself. And this, of course, I was working with Bill Brandt's work at the time at the gallery, and just feel like that's sort of like a little love note to Bill Brandt. And on the same trip, I learned that it was better for me to go to places that were soothing rather than bustling cities. And I started taking a little bit better care of myself.
So can
I
you
felt like,
can you say the work you were doing in the gallery and what you were seeing day in and day out from these masters influenced you as you kept on moving forward?
big time,
Big time.
big time. Yeah, I think there's also maybe like a self-consciousness that existed. And Bill Brandt, especially, it was sort of, he had a little bit of like a grotesque way of photographing women. And I think there was also this urge to have some of that ownership back, right? A lot of these photographs were taken by men of other women. And I wanted to explore some of those concepts, but what does it look like with a feminine or interpersonal experience?
Mm.
So I've always, I was obsessed with Harry Callahan and this love he had for Eleanor. He photographed his wife over and over, and they are just tender and stunning. And I wanted to treat myself like Eleanor, spending a little quieter time in my own mind, staying in more bizarre Airbnbs, like this place in Maine, which was like the darkest road I've ever driven on. Um, Linda just asked in the chat, which
Yep.
I wasn't sure if I would talk about, but a lot of these pictures, which I don't know, we're a lot of photo purists in the room, but they're made as stills from videos on my phone. So I'll set up a video in a space and
Uh-huh.
sort of do this like performance and talking about like the things that I wouldn't share. Nobody will see those until I'm dead. But that's why the format is sort of elongated in many cases also, is because it's a snap from the video. And also, I'm going to talk about this a little bit with another project, but it sort of limits how big they can go, which I kind of like, in the world of printing, that's sort of a terrible thing, but I don't want them to be big. They're supposed to be intimate and precious. So I'm kind of glad that they are actually limited by the medium itself. I stopped trying to make such pretty photographs and learning how to better express myself without so much sexuality. This was like a moment I was alone in the Louvre. This image was taken with a proper camera. A mix of them are. The series from the house are all with an SLR, just self-timer, it's called. This was after those years. I had bought a new bed and I didn't let anybody sleep in it for over 2 years. I visited Magritte's home in Belgium, where I escaped one Christmas with my mother. So time is going fast. So I'm gonna sort of jump off from this one into the Subway series.
Okay.
So
Don't
this
worry about
was like,
time. You know, do it. You know, do what you wanted to do. You don't have to jump.
okay, right, thanks.
We're engaged.
I love it, thanks. So my love for New York City really started to grow. I quit smoking cigarettes when I lived on the M train because of all the stairs. And now I look at those tracks as like a pivotal player in my world.
Mm.
This was if you take the 6 train to the end, you could scoop through the old City Hall station and see the original space back there, which is stunning. But of course, I did that one night and I got sort of stuck on the turnaround for like 20 minutes. So I was like, all right, I'm alone on this train. I guess I'll make some pictures in here. And again, there was nobody in there. I propped the camera on probably the other pole that was in there.
That must be fun when the light bulb goes off. I'm going to be stuck here. Let's take photos.
Fuck it, just let's go.
Wait, what is that? Is that a French term? Fuck
Oh
it?
yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's totally fine.
It's city. Sorry. Um, this was my birthday, which I've tried to always make a self-portrait on my birthday and keep track.
What day is your
I
birthday?
also August 28th.
Okay.
And the way that I title them to keep them all in order is just also by date.
Mm.
At this time, I started dating again, and it really did not feel right either. I felt really disconnected from sharing myself. But then I started reading tarot cards, and this was sort of a new way for me to, I don't know, have a different therapy in some way. I put in here a couple of Anne Brigman's portraits, which I feel when I discovered her work, I learned about it in college, but she sort of came back into my life at this really pivotal time. And just these strong female nudes from like the 20s are just sort of rocked my world. Found myself really influenced heavy by symbols and inanimate characters.
Mm.
This was our wonderful apartment in Bushwick, New York, that we were moving out of. And there used to be a giant, beautiful tree in that backyard. And once it was gone, it felt like it was just the clearest sign that it was time for us to go. My old roommate, Frank, is in this space right now, and it was devastating. So fast forward a little bit, in the spring of 2022, I ended that less than positive relationship and I quit my job. And I went on a journey to find a bit about my inner self and where I wanted to land. So my descansos, my grave sites for grief, have become this archive, and I am still adding to it. So another project that has been sort of concurrent, I feel like everything I work on is ongoing, and I sort of intend to work on it for as long as I'm making pictures, except this. This was overlapping with everything else, but I call it private publicity. And it began at a time where I was feeling very overwhelmed by the accessibility of social media, that people could see so much into our lives. Thinking about the permissions and what language is used to signal what is private, what is public. And I've always been in a professional position where I want others to be able to find me. So I've never had a private profile or hidden anything on the web. I began thinking more about the aggressiveness and intrusive way we are forced to give permission. This image was inspired by an artist named Caitlin Copenhaver, who I was connecting with at the time, whose art is focused on text and textile. And this is one of her pieces where she was writing this phrase. She was last seen on these abandoned mattresses throughout the city.
She
in her
presented
work.
for us.
Did she? She's the best.
Yeah, she showed the whole series of those.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Barbara Kruger, of course, the way she used text. So again, I was recycling images from my own archive with language found on sites like social media, email, even browser windows, and like adult sites. So the most basic of terms became sort of bigger when they were used as a demand. The language I found was ominous, and I felt like I was in conversation with the darkness of the web. If you can't read this, it says our agreement and what happens if we disagree, which is just like basic text on when you sign up for Facebook. I was seeing someone shortly that had been tracking me in a way that I didn't know was possible through a messenger site. So now I've learned how to turn that all off. And if I share my location, it's for safety with my friends. So the contrast of public and private space has always been a challenge for me. So the work I make is so intimate, and my career is based on relationships with people. And the self-portraits sneak back in. And some of these files are terrible. And I just sort of love that because they'll never escape the screen because the print quality is so limited. Some of them can. The process of deciding whether or not to include punctuation was an interesting part of the conversation for me. To mute a TV is one thing, to silence a voice is another. And the series morphed into personal anecdotes, feeding familial emotions. And the more personal they became, the more I wanted to stop. So I did. And then I want to go into this because it's the most romantic of the series that I've created. And this is called The Sensual Subway. So living in New York, I lived there for 7 years, and the subway became one of my favorite things about being there. There was a closeness that you could feel with strangers that was unavoidable and sometimes just electric. On the same theme of public and private space, the way people were with each other underground shows an intimacy I just really admired.
And Frances, here, are you taking these images and they can tell you're taking the images, or are you doing it a little bit secretly?
Very secretly.
Very, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't engage with any of these people except one that you'll see. But I just loved this like closeness. Sometimes you were smushed together with people, and sometimes you just like could release and rest your head on. I mean, they were obviously together. There's also a great mystery to who these people were. The signage from the station and the subjects finding their way created these conversations that I just couldn't resist. I thought a lot about Barbara Crane and this series, Private Views. These are all Polaroid. And the above ground trains offered this delightful natural light some days. This little girl knew I was taking her picture, and she knew she looked good.
So on a day like this, Frances, are you going out saying I'm taking photos, or is it I'm traveling somewhere and then I'll just take some photos?
Yeah, I mean, every day I lived there, I took the subway at least 5, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So it just became sort of my practice and looking for it. I just visited this past weekend and I was so excited to get onto the train just to, see people interact with each other. It's like, what is about a city that I just really love?
So give us a little sense of your editing. Like, so
Mm.
you're in the city for a weekend and you take all these things, is it immediate? Do you put it to the side? Because a lot of these are on your phone too, as well, right?
Mhm.
Give us a little bit of a taste of your mechanics around this. Like, do I
Yeah.
have like at some point do you say, well, I know I've got something great. At 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I saw that young lady. She's great. I know that's going to be special. How does it work for you?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, sometimes they just linger and I'll forget that I made them and, go back, scroll through the millions of pictures on my phone. It's kind of daunting. Um, and then sometimes I just immediately edit because I'm so excited about it.
Mm.
And when you're on the subway, if you don't have service, you can still edit your photos. And I always, there's some of these images that I still picture in color. Um, like these two girls had like orange sweatshirts on. So I have this kind of like push and pull of not always wanting to make things black and white, but then I just always come back to this space where it's pure. But like this one, for example, I don't think I was even aware of um of making this image until later and scrolling back and seeing this sort of silhouette. And it's not the easiest picture to see too. I think I was just excited by, the light at the time. And then you're on the bus. This is the bus too. So you're like, oh, whoops, got to get off the bus and onto the next thing. So it's like, I guess depending on what stage of the commute. This was my best friend's bachelorette party, actually, and the train. Oh, I regret thinking we should take the train. It was so late. And then despite all the crazy stuff also happening on the transit, I tried to focus on these loving parts of the commuter's path. Because if you look to your left, like there might be some chaotic thing happening too, but I try not to photograph any of that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Do you go into it like with some type of direction in your head, like you're on the train, I'm doing couples in love or families, I'm doing relationship, beautiful relationships, and that becomes your focus for the day or for the week, whatever it is, or is it more I'm on the train and I'm gonna and I see this and I see that and I capture it all and then you do it in your edit?
Yeah, I do take a lot more pictures that aren't just people touching. I actually have a couple in here that I really loved. Like the stations themselves, right, have such their own personas.
Right.
Uh, all the tile work I've always loved so much. These eyeballs at Chambers Street Station um, are irresistible to me. But I feel like I am always looking for this, like some sort of personal interaction that's happening. And maybe it's because I've been so focused on this like love story of, with my practice with how I love photographs and looking at them. Like this photograph by Bruce Davidson, I've always adored. And he photographed so much in the subways and I can never get enough. But finding these interactions, like this guy was maybe kind of annoyed. This was on one of the ferries, but she was drawing him. The light on his face was beautiful. So I was like, I get it. He looked a little annoyed, but um, I was thrilled to see this happening. Is it the most exciting photograph on earth? Not really, but it's something about their interaction that um, I still love this photo. Um, and this is one of my favorites from the series for sure. This might have been Valentine's Day a few years ago. But his serious face and this like mission to get home with the flowers is like enchanting for me.
Yeah, and one thing
And the
that you
clash.
really do, one thing that you really do beautiful is you you read into what, at least what you think is that, the different mission of these people. Like that guy with the flowers. I mean, you've read that. I mean, that's perfect. That guy was on a mission to get home, right? I mean, there's no turning back on that. He doesn't know, he doesn't have any sense of anything around him. He's getting to his girl or his guy or whatever it is, the one he loves.
Right,
Beautiful.
with the train moving and he's on the yellow, it's like no concern. And then it's also like the clashing of the cultures on the subway was wonderful. I lived in Bed-Stuy, so it bordered the like Hasidic communities, and just seeing the different ways of dress that all coexisted together.
Yeah. The city is great for that. Yeah.
It's just a feast. And there's like little gestures. This kid, I mean, this is not romantic at all, but he's just like, please get me away from everybody else. I want to be in my own world. And you can get really close with people and all parties remain unfazed. Remember, this was Halloween and the energy of the city was spooky, and
So
I
that's
don't,
you, right? That's you sitting.
yeah.
Right. Okay. It's
And
good
she's
that you
just like,
qualified. It's good that you qualified that as Halloween. Thank you.
oh, sure. With the stripes and,
Yeah,
like,
everything.
even if it wasn't, it wouldn't be
Yeah.
such a surprise. And this was one of those instances where she was like in my legs and I was like, yeah, great. This is like nice, intimate moment with a stranger. I felt like part voyeur, part neighbor, like finding my way into people's conversations. So I think this for sure would be an image that I didn't know I was excited about until later, for sure. Because you look at it small and you're just like, I don't know what that is.
And you're really undercover with your phone, right? I mean, like no one can tell anything
Mm-mm.
that you're
Yeah, if
doing.
you hold the right way and you're not like up in their
Yeah.
face,
How would they know?
how would they know? And then like through COVID, things changed. Everybody was wearing a mask. Um, thanks, George. But it was these moments of affection that I missed so much. So this was after COVID, and you could tell I was a little bit shy, right? So I'm like still sort of behind the door. You can see the screws in the wall. So I was like sort of like around the corner. Um, and then this is the last one I have from this series. And it's all about like finding that magic if you want to look for it, and making like the choice to remember. And it's possible because of the photograph. Thank you for having me share tonight.
Oh, that's great. No, that's great. So one question I have to ask you, you mentioned no one will see those moving pictures until you die, right? So do you have that archived somewhere for that reason?
I mean, not neatly yet.
Okay. Okay. So, but
And it
there's a
has,
note somewhere that your niece, your uncle, if someone gets it, it's okay to show them. I mean, is that the idea in 50 years?
yeah, I still have control now, so I can get
Yeah.
rid of what's definitely not okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
But it is funny to think about that process of like making these videos. And I've never thought in video form. I've always been like so still. Um, and maybe somebody will find them interesting later.
Yeah. Aline, really has it perfect. Thank you for sharing yourself and your process. You really hit it right on the head. That's is she a friend?
No, I don't know,
Oh,
Eileen.
okay. But that's very nice. That really hits it right on the head. So what's next for you? Give us a little background of what you do to make a living.
Sure. So I am a whole year into my freelance process. I just did my taxes as an LLC and I zeroed out, so I'm feeling pretty good. But I do a variety of things. So I teach workshops, about basically how to get your work together for an exhibition. So all of my jobs in the museum and in the gallery were really exhibition focused. And that's my favorite part of it. So like figuring out how pictures live on a wall, right? Like this is my space. I'm going to hang everything I can. So I work individually with artists. I'm not sure if Nancy is here. She presented a couple weeks ago, but working with people like that to develop exhibitions and work on traveling them. So finding different spaces that might be interested in the concepts and develop programming around that. And then I won't swear again, but helping people like get their stuff together.
No, you have to curse. It's fine.
I'm surprised I only cursed once.
We love your passion.
Thanks. But nobody likes applying for shows and stuff like that. So I work with a few artists of basically getting all of their files together and doing submissions for either exhibitions or grants, and creating these nice marketing materials to send out. So consulting and design work, if I could put pictures in a row for the rest of my life, I'd be thrilled. And juried shows, I've been really loving doing juried exhibitions and the writing component that comes with that. Trying to take, a flurry of over 1,000 images submitted and coming out with an exhibition with a statement of some kind has been really lovely process.
Yeah. Beautiful. And we can reach you on your website, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in any way, maybe Jay can put that into the chat room, or you can type it quickly into the chat room. So
Frank,
what?
quick question. I'm sorry. She did not mention her website. So if Frances could mention the website right now, it would be really great.
Oh, sure. Yep. It's just my first and last name.com. I'll put it in here. Thank you, everybody, for these beautiful comments. And got to go for dinner. And thank you to my partner who is letting me ditch him for dinner for Valentine's Day. I'll be home soon.
Oh, he's on as well?
I doubt it.
Oh, okay.
But I ditched him for tonight. But what a great support.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So, what is next for you? I mean, are you working on a current project now? Anything coming up? And you said a book?
Yeah, so I am working, we've had this project called a Yellow Rose Project, which I developed with my project partner, Meg Griffiths, who's based in Texas. And it was in August 2020 was the centennial of the 19th Amendment, granting voting rights for women in the US. Not all, it's a very troubled history, but we put together a project of over, it's 106 women that created work in response to the centennial. So we have a book in the process and also a traveling exhibition. So hopefully that book will be out in the next year or so, and the show will continue to travel at universities and museums, any space that really champions the programming side of it too.
And so one of the stops on that tour is going to be with us, right?
Is it? Oh yeah, talking about your thing. It's ready to go, Frank. It'll be in the South too.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, we would love to have you come and present, with any of your colleagues. That would be a gift. So you have a platform. When you're ready, you just let us know. And if anyone else has any questions, put them in the chat room or raise your hand. And Frances, I cannot thank you. This was a long. We had this conversation a long time ago, and I'm thrilled that you came and you did it, and a phenomenal job. And I think I'm sure what's really nice is when we leave these evenings inspired. And that's really what you've done. You've inspired all of us to look a little differently and see things that we may not have seen, and pick up a little bit of your tricks on how you did this and how you did that. And that's really grateful. We're grateful for your intuition and sharing with us. What I'd like you to do is just, finish up the evening for us with any comment that you have.
Just in general comment?
Yeah, words of wisdom about your photography and your craft, and to leave us, something that we should think about. Between your parents' home, the evolution, your brother, any of, new relationships.
I would say don't worry about sharing everything right away. We're in this mode of like, you take a picture, you have to put it on social media and get feedback. Make the picture because you really want to make it. And if you never show anybody, fine. I think, I have many images that will never see the light of day, but I'm glad that I made them.
Okay, great. Well, again, Frances, thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank, so much.
And I appreciate everyone coming in. Like I say, it is 8 o'clock now on the East Coast. So it's still time, you can still do the right thing by your sweethearts. And I thank everyone for coming in, and we'll see you, in a few weeks with more work. Anyone who hasn't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. And Frances, thank you so much.